Hello, welcome to part 2 of our Dune Tank and Briefs Sewalong. So in our last one, we got ready, we got our tools together, we talked about fabric type. Today we're going to talk all about sizing and fit and alterations. This is probably the part that everyone likes the least when dealing with sewing for their bodies, but here's the good news. It's a knit, very forgiving, and it's not like this. It's not like a fitted woven garment, so there's a lot of forgiveness. It's a tank, it's briefs. Don't overthink it too hard. It's going to be great regardless what you pick. So we're going to go through how to choose a size, things to think about based on your fabric, based on your body, based on what you want to do with it. If you want to wear it as jammies, if you want to wear it out under your pants. And we're going to talk about a bunch of pattern alterations. So if you're ready, we're going to go through all of that now. Let's talk about choosing a size. So in your booklet, first thing we have here is our Getting Started page. And in our Getting Started page, I talk about how it's designed and how it fits. So first off, how it's designed. It's a minimal tank top. It has bound armholes and necklines. The straps attach with O-rings with elastic, so that gives you some indication of how the top is going to fit your shoulders. The briefs are a full cut high rise with elastic free bound openings. So again, full cut high rise, so we know it's going to be high up on your waist and full on your butt, and just giving you some clues. These are like little clues to get when you're reading that first paragraph. Lounge in the briefs at home or wear under your clothes as traditional underwear. So it can be absolutely worn as regular underwear, or it can just be for lounging, whatever you like. Choosing a size, so I say this in every pattern, and because it's true every time. Our bodies change with time and life conditions, so it's always a good idea to measure your body before you start any project. That is true. It's obviously, if you're watching this now, it's COVID times, so everybody's body's constantly shifting. It's probably different than it was a year and a half ago. So be kind to yourself, remeasure yourself, and just make sure you know what your numbers are, and don't feel judgy about them. They just are what they are. That's fine. So there is, compare your measurements to the size chart and see how much ease is between your body and the finished garment. The Dune Tank and Briefs are designed to fit with negative ease. What does that mean? That means that the garment is smaller than your body. So think about like a fitted t-shirt that you have to stretch, put on your body, and then release and snap back around your body. That means it's smaller than your body. It has negative ease. Unlike something that is bigger than your body that you put on and it drapes around your body. That would have positive ease. So negative ease means that the garment is smaller than you are. Of course, that is relative, and we're going to talk about that. There's likely more ease in the briefs than store-bought briefs in your closet. Exactly my point. So you want to just simply size down if you would like a tighter fit, but note that the waist will require enough stretch to fit over the hips. A custom fit can be achieved by blending between sizes should you prefer more or less ease through the body. So this is going to be giving you a ton of clues here. What that means is exactly like it says. Most underwear is designed to be much smaller, especially the briefs. Let's talk about the briefs specifically. The store-bought briefs are typically have way more negative ease than this pattern has. I did that for a bunch of reasons. One is that if you want to wear this as loungewear, you might not want this to be as tight as traditional underwear. And also, maybe you just like a little more comfort. If you want it to be smaller, you just simply size down. It's pretty straightforward. But like I said, you do want to make sure that the waist can stretch to get around your hips. So you don't want to size down so much that you're popping stitches to stretch and get up over your hips to get onto your waist. I am, in the next sew along portion, going to talk about how to use that stretch thread, and that will provide you with more stretch in the waistband or in the waist area. So if you are someone that wants to size down in the waist and up in the hip and are concerned about that stretch thread might be the answer for you so that you get more stretch up onto your waist. Or you could consider a far stretchier fabric, and we'll talk about that. Of course, I always suggest tracing off if you're thinking of doing pattern alterations, or even if you're not, and sewing a muslin, a test version. So I feel like knits doesn't get talked about that much, sewing a muslin in knits, because the muslin itself is a woven fabric, but making a muslin meaning making a test version. And you want to, again, just not use something that's so different than what you intend to use in the future for your finished version. With knits, personally, what I do is I find a knit that I like, that I hope turns out to fit me great, but I didn't make a big investment in the fabric, but that it is similar to what I want to make with my finished. So if I want to make it out of a cotton spandex, I'm not going to make a test version out of rayon knit, for example, or vice versa. So you just really want to take that into account, that the test version is going to wear similar to your finished version. And then, of course, the all-important knits shrink a lot, so definitely pre-wash. The model is wearing, my model Trista, is wearing a size large, and she fits the body sizes pretty straight on. It may not look like it. Her bust looks like it's fuller than the large, but that's mostly because she's braless. Full disclosure, we did try it with a bra on, and I just did not like the way it looked. It looked unnatural. I wanted her to look like she was really lounging at home in a natural state in this, and she was very comfortable with modeling this way, thankfully, because I think it represents exactly the way the pattern should look. So we get to our sizing chart, and we need all three measurements: bust, waist, hip. So bust obviously is for our tank, waist is for both, and hip is technically really for both, because depending on how long the tank is going to hit your body, you are going to go past the waist and encounter some part of the hip, even if not the fullest part of your hip. So again, you're going to look at those measurements, and you're going to compare them to our finished measurements, and you're going to see that there is negative ease, and it's around 2.5 inches for each size. There's a teeny bit of variance, but not much. And that's giving you a ballpark idea on how much negative ease is going to be in every part of it. So the main consideration let's start with the tank. The main consideration with the tank is probably going to be the bust, but I also would not want the waist and the hip to be too tight. So if you need to blend from a smaller size in the bust to a slightly bigger size in the waist and hip, that's a very easy adjustment, and I'm going to show you how to do that once I stop talking. You'll see some of the pattern adjustments. And so that is a very simple adjustment. If you find you want a full bust adjustment, I'm also going to talk about that, because maybe every part of you falls under a size large, but your bust is a 2X. I understand. The good news is that this is a knit, and knits are very forgiving. And again, this is meant to be like a loungewear item, so there's a little forgiveness in the fit there. But we want you to feel comfortable and good, and we don't want that to be overly stretched. So we're going to talk about how to do a full bust adjustment as well. For the briefs, like I said, the biggest consideration here is your hip to waist ratio. If you find you are a small in the waist and a large in the hip, we can definitely make that blend from one to the other. And again, we talk about that momentarily. But you, again, need to make sure that waist is going to stretch enough to get over your hips. And so you want to test your knit to make sure that there's enough give, and make sure that your stitch that you're using will also provide enough give. I just wanted to show for comparison different, I never thought I'd be showing on the internet my underwear, but here's some of my underwear. These are both ready to wear garments. Neither of these are the Dune, because I wanted to show you, just for example, how different underwear sizing can be. So this one on top is made out of a really super stretchy synthetic fabric, and it stretches like crazy. And it's meant to fit really tight, you know, like a bathing suit would fit. So it's pretty small. because it's very lightweight and stretchy. The one under it is much more comparable to the Dune. It's more of a cotton knit. It stretches, but it doesn't have quite the same amount of stretch as this one, because this is like a super synthetic-y stretch. And even still, this size here is smaller than the size I would wear on the size chart for the Dune, because I've sized down in this so that it would fit me more snug so I could wear it under my jeans. So that's a perfect example. If I were making the Dune, I would be falling into the large, but this particular underwear that is right here that I did not make is gonna fall more into like the small medium area. So again, if you're wanting it to fit a little bit more like traditional underwear, you're probably gonna wanna size down a little bit. Again, the main concern is just making sure you can get it over your hips and onto your waist, which is why testing your stretch stitches is gonna be very important to make sure that you have enough give to get around and get up onto your waist. And the last thing is really length is the only other real concern. The tank can be lengthened and shortened. It's not meant to be very long. You can see on the model here that it doesn't go long like a regular shirt, but it's also not cropped. You could totally crop it, by the way. But it is meant to fit, somewhere just past the waist, but it's not very long. If you want that to be longer or shorter, you can definitely do that. And the same is true of the height of the brief. If that distance here is just too high for you, or too low for you for that matter, either way, you can lengthen or shorten this because they are very high-waisted. Again, but that's dependent on your body. Some of us are longer in the torso and some of us are shorter in the torso. So that might be a little high for you, it might be a little low for you. And that's a really easy adjustment too. And that's really all there is to say about fit. Some of it's gonna be about just making a test version and seeing how it goes. But if you know for sure, like for me personally, I always have to do a bigger hip than my waist. It's just the way I'm built. So you can make some of those educated guesses right out of the gate and make your muslin to accommodate some of those things that you already know that your body will need. And then learn from your muslin and make further changes from there. And of course, as always, reach out to me if I can help you with fit. I'm always there to help. My email is everywhere on my website. It's just contact@christinehaynes.com. Easy. So let's go on and get to doing some pattern alterations. Let's say you want to lengthen either your briefs or your tank. We're going to do the exact same method regardless of the piece that you're doing it with. We have our lengthen and shorten line here on our briefs, and that's where we want to slice it and drop it. So the first thing we're going to do is cut along this line. Okay, let's say we want to lengthen the pattern by 1 inch. So we're going to take a scrap piece of paper, and you want to make sure it's as wide as the pattern piece you're working with. So let's pretend we're going to be making the size medium. So this is wide enough for that. And we're going to draw a line on our paper. And then we want to draw a second line, the distance down that we want to be lengthening it. So in this instance, we're going to be lengthening it by 1 inch. And so I'm going to just draw a second line 1 inch down. I also want to draw a straight line on the edge that's going to line up with the place on fold edge. So I'm going to use the edge of my paper to make sure that I'm drawing a nice straight line along here. So I'm going to take the top portion of the pattern and I'm going to line up this corner, this bottom corner, into this corner right here. And I'm going to tape in place the bottom edge of the pattern piece with that top line on the paper that I drew. Making sure that it's also straight in line with the straight line over here. I'm going to take the other pattern piece and I'm going to drop it into this other corner right here. And I'm going to repeat that by taping it along this line. So obviously we have a bit of a jog here in our side seam that we need to connect. So again, let's say we're making the medium. We're going to connect from this top line, this top corner I mean, to this bottom corner. And we're going to draw a new side seam. So that line right there is my new side seam. And from here, I can cut around the entire pattern piece. So I'm going to cut this excess paper off the back first, because I don't need all of that. And I'm going to cut along this fold line, cut this excess off. And then I can simply cut the pattern out the way I normally would from here. Cutting along my size medium along the waist. Following my new line down the side seam. And then continuing down the leg opening. And to the crotch. So now, here's my new piece. Size medium all the way around, but just an inch longer to accommodate a longer body. And again, you could do this on either the briefs or on the tank, same method. If you find that either the tank or the briefs are too long, you can always shorten along the lengthen and shorten line. The method for doing this is the same on the briefs as well as the tank. You're going to measure next to this line how much you would like to reduce the height. Especially on the briefs, these are high-waisted. They might be too high-waisted for you, and you don't want to take it off the top. You want to just take it from the middle so you retain that waistband, the waistline, and the leg curve openings. So we're going to simply draw. Let's say we want to reduce this by an inch. We're going to draw a line an inch from that lengthen shorten line. So there's my line, 1 inch below. I'm going to fold along that line. And usually it creases really well once you've drawn it because it's nice and sharp. And then I'm simply going to bring that lower line up to my upper line. And I'm creasing the fold on the underside as I'm going across. So this is now an inch shorter. I want to tape that in place so that it's held in that position. And let's say I'm making the size medium. You can see there's a jog here in the side seam now. I need to make a new side seam. I'm going to draw from this top corner to this bottom corner. And I'm going to draw a new side seam. And from here, I can just cut out my medium, cut along the side seam, leg opening, and the crotch area. And that's my new piece, just reduced by an inch in length. And again, you can apply this to the tank as well. falling into more than one size category for a pattern is exceptionally common. It's actually rare to find that you are bust, waist, and hip all in one size. So you might need to blend sizes on your tank. Very, very common. So in this instance, let's say you want to go from, say, a medium to a large, or even a medium to an XL. You wouldn't really want to go more than, say, 2 sizes. I mean, you could, but you will be very dramatically angling the side seam. And then you may end up wanting to sort of curve out that connection down here. This pattern is not designed to be on an extreme angle on the side. So you wouldn't want to go more than like 2 sizes over. That's pretty much as I would suggest doing. So let's say you want to go from the medium to the large. Very, very simple. You're going to simply draw a line from this corner right here where the medium is to the bottom corner where the large is. Very, very simple to go from one to the other. Just like that. Very slight angle. Again, if you wanted to do 2 sizes, your angle is going to be a little more extreme. Let's say you're going from the medium to the extra large. It's a little more of an extreme angle. And the only issue with that is that when you fold up this hem, the width of the hem is going to be now not a lot, but a little bit wider than the area it's going up into. So you just don't want to go much more than that amount of an angle. Once you've got your new line drawn, very, very straightforward. You're going to simply cut out following that new line and then following the smaller size up around the rest of the top of the tank. Super simple. If you want to use more than one size for the briefs, it's fairly straightforward. Just like with the tank, you're going to be angling from the top corner to the bottom corner. The only real difference here is that on the brief front you have this angle so that it matches the brief back. So you will not be using the bottom part of the edge here. You'll be using this top corner of the edge. So you've got this angle here, and you're going to be using the top left, not the bottom right. So let's say we're going from the medium to the large. We're going to be going from this corner right here on the medium to, again, this top angled corner here on the large. Simply going to use your ruler and line that up from that spot at the top to this spot at the bottom and draw yourself a new side seam. So again, that is retaining this little angle down here. I will draw into it so you can see it clearer on camera, hopefully. So this angle right here remains intact. So you're going from this top corner to this top corner, leaving this angle and then continuing on with the leg opening curve right here. And that is as simple as it is. So when thinking about doing a full bust adjustment with a knit, it's done differently, right? It's not a woven. You're not adding a dart into this. You could if you find that you really needed one, but it's really not designed to have a dart in it. What we really want to do is just essentially widen just this area without affecting everything else. So what we're going to do is essentially that. We're going to widen the area around the bust, which you're also going to want to do on the back bodice, and that might, or the back of the tank. And that might feel weird, like you don't need more width in the back necessarily, but we're just widening that circumference around your bust, including the back. So if you're taking your measurement around that part of your body, you're widening that whole part of your body on the pattern piece. And then it's going to largely affect the front, but it's meant to just widen that area specifically. It's a little bit of a guesswork when we're working with a knit because the different knits are going to stretch differently. You might wear it with a bra, you might not wear it with a bra, you might want to add a shelf bra, which I'm going to show you to do when we get to the hack section. There's a lot of play here, there's a lot of variance, and it's not as straight forward and cut and dry as when you're doing a full bust adjustment on a woven. So I highly recommend making a muslin in the kind of fabric that you want to make your finished version in, if not the exact same fabric, and just see how it fits right out of the envelope without any changes. This alteration I'm going to show you, there's a lot of different ways to do full bust adjustments on knits. So if you Google it, you're going to find 10 different ways to do it. They probably all are fantastic. So if the way I'm doing it doesn't suit you, you could try one of the other ones. There are many different ways. The version I'm going to show you does not change the length, but you might want a little more length if you find that the bust area is pulling the bottom of the tank up at all. But you could do what I'm about to do and then also add length. So I prefer to do those separately on a knit versus on a traditional full bust adjustment. You are adding a fuller dart and dropping it down all at the same time. In this instance, we're just going to widen this one area up here. All right, so first to get started, we're going to take our pattern piece, cut out in the size you want to make, and you want to have something under it, like I've got Swedish tracing paper here, and we're going to trace off this pattern onto the tracing paper. Okay, so now that we have it traced off, we are going to do a couple of pivots on this, essentially swinging it towards the extra amount and then swinging it back. So first thing we want to determine is how much you want to add. You may not need to add as much as you would on a woven because this is a knit. So let's say you want to add 1 inch per side. So we're going to add a 1/2 inch here because that would then also add a 1/2 inch on the back, and that would be adding 2 inches overall. So I'm going to use the red pencil so you can see the new marks, and I'm going to make a line over here a 1/2 inch from my corner edge, and I'm going to pivot the whole pattern towards that line. I'm going to make it a little bit longer. So I'm going to anchor it up here at this point, making sure it stays right in line, and I'm going to pivot the armhole until it hits that spot right there. And again, I want to make sure that this top part stays right where it's supposed to be. So you can hold it, you could stick a pin or whatever, something that's going to hold it in this position. Once you've hit that mark right here, then you know that you are right where you want to be, and you can weight both of those down. So again, this top part is right in line with where it's supposed to be. And once it hits this spot over here, I'm going to hold it down and anchor it. I now want to draw this new armhole, which is now being brought out that extra amount. So I'm going to trace around that. And that's going to meet up with that original point right here. So you can already see that this is now just swinging it out. I'm gonna now anchor from this spot right here, and I'm gonna swing it out until we hit the center front. So again, anchoring at this point right here. And once I hit the center front down here at the bottom right corner, I know that I am where I want to be. And again, I'm going to just weigh that guy down. And this is my new side seam. So that line is connecting with this new corner that I've made, as well as the bottom corner down here. Sorry, it's slightly off camera, where the hem meets. That now is my new pattern piece. It is now slightly wider just in this one area, right in here, which will give you a little extra room just in your bust. Now, we have changed this armhole curve. You may need a slightly different length arm binding because of that. So you might want to take that into account. The good news is that you do the arm binding before you do the neck binding, and if it's a little too long, you could always just trim it off. So if you're in doubt, you can just make your new binding a little bit longer and trim it off here, and that's not a big deal. The math on this is that the bindings on the entire tank are 90% the length. So if you wanted to, you could measure this and cut your new piece to be 90% less seam allowance, of course. And that's simply it. You could trace this now fresh off onto a new piece of paper if you like, but you're gonna have the same front, the same center front, the same hem at the bottom. You just have a new side seam that angles out to a slightly wider area here, and then this just curves back up to your center, your top, where the strap connects at the for the shoulder. So it's just widening this area here. And it's as simple as that. And like I said, there are a number of full bust adjustment tutorials on the internet. So if you try this one and it doesn't quite work for you, you could try one of the other ones. I'm sure they're all lovely. There's just different approaches. There's no one right way to any of this, and that's actually one of the great things about sewing. There's 100 ways to sew a dart, there's 100 ways to alter a dart. So here's the way I like it, but again, if you want to try one of the other ways, that's cool too. But hopefully you like this one as well. When I designed the Dune Tank and Briefs, I wanted this leg curve to be pretty low. Personally, this is just the way I wanted it to fit. I wanted it to be low in the front and have a very full back on the brief back area. So this leg curve might just feel too low for you, and that is totally fine. It's super simple to reshape this curve into anything you want. The one thing you want to take into account is this angle right here that lines up with the back piece. And same down here, you're going to see there's a little angle here and a little angle here. So let's say we're using the size medium here. First thing you're going to do is you're going to cut out specifically to that size. We don't need the other sizes for this. So unlike when you're doing lengthening and shortening and stuff like that, you want all the other sizes still to be there so that you can use those, because you need that extra space when you're blending sizes and stuff. We only need the size that we're working with here. Okay, so we've picked our size, we're working with a medium. And here we have our size medium. Great. but we want this curve to be higher, let's say. So again, we don't want to interrupt this angle here, and we don't want to interrupt this angle here. But what we can do is work from that point to that same point over here. So when we're making this new curve, we just want to take those two things into account. So if you're wondering what that amount is over, it's our seam allowance, which is 3/8. So I'm going to just draw that in so we know sort of where everything is supposed to realign. So you can see that 3/8 comes right to that spot right there. And the same is true along the bottom for where the crotch connects, right here. So we really don't want to interrupt the seam allowance over here or the seam allowance down here, but the space in between is fair game. So let's say we want to just make this a bigger curve here. We can simply work from this point here, again over to this point here, and just reshape it. So I'm going to draw this in to be just a higher curve. And if you don't like your initial, let's say that's just too high right off the bat, you can just move it over. It's not a big deal. So we're going up, and then we need to come down to this spot down here, again, to make sure that we're not interrupting that angle right there. Once you have a curve you're happy with, I feel like I'm making a lot of marks here, but hopefully you get the idea. And I'll cut it out. So let's say that's the line we're looking for. We just want that to be higher up on your front hip. Again, you're not going to interrupt that spot at the very bottom, so we're going to work from that point up. And we're going to follow the new line that we just drew. And again, we want to end at that bottom of that 3/8 angle. So we're not interrupting that spot, and we're not interrupting that spot. I'm going to turn it over so we can see it without all of my markings. And you can see that this is now just a higher pitch. But this little angle is still intact, and this little angle is still intact. It's just that this has been raised and widened essentially. Now, if you decide to do this, which again, totally, you can see that was not a complicated alteration by any means, and I was just winging it. So if you want to, you could continuously reshape this and recurve this. But one thing you need to take into account, obviously the fit is going to be a little different, but also this length has now been changed, which means that your leg binding is probably not going to fit anymore. And you're going to need to measure this and do a little bit of math, because I already did the math for the leg opening that exists, but I obviously can't do the math for every possible variation from that point on. So the binding is 90% the length of the opening. So what that means is if you were to measure this out and times that by 90%, you're going to find what that length should be, and you could just recut your binding to fit your new leg opening. Easy as that. Don't forget to take into account that you're losing seam allowance, and of course you're losing it on the back side as well. So you just want to take those things into account. but because you're changing this curve, you're therefore changing the length of this distance. But it's really not complicated. You could reshape this, you could make this higher here and then pitch back down. You can do whatever you like. It's really, really easy to just change this however it suits your tastes. Yep. Our last alteration is going to be for narrowing the crotch area itself. This might be too wide, it might be uncomfortable for you, that's totally fine. And what you're looking to do is just bring this seam line over. We don't want to mess with the shape of, for this one, this is the brief back. We don't want to change the shape of the back itself. We're just looking to bring this over. So I'm going to use the extra small line here so that you can see it as clearly as possible. Let's say we want to bring this over a 1/2 inch. Now keep in mind that that will reduce a 1/2 inch on each side. So I'm going to draw my line over from the corner, from this corner right here, over a 1/2 inch. So I have a line here now. So this is going to connect to this angle that already exists. And again, I don't want to like reshape this too dramatically. I'm just looking to go from this point as smoothly as possible into this existing line. So I'm going to use a ruler here that's slightly curved to just blend in as smoothly but also as quickly as possible. So as smooth but quick. So want to do that essentially. Now I'm changing the angle here, which is then also going to change the way it intersects with the brief front. So if you see here, these all kind of come down. If you want that to come a little bit more curved down, you can obviously do that. Just pitch this down a little bit more and then reconnect in that way so that it curves down, a little more downward motion. Whichever is fine, totally fine. Whatever works for your body shape is completely fine. Once you've got that configured, we're going to cut it out in the size that you're making because we need that line so that we can match it with the brief front. So I'm going to use this angle here. And you're going to cut it out in this extra small, or whatever size you're doing, obviously. So there's the new brief back. And again, this has just been brought in a 1/2 inch. So we want to use our brief front. And if you look at your brief front, you can see that there is an angle at the bottom. And you might be wondering, why is there this weird angle right down here? And it's because it lines up with the back. So let's cut this out for the extra small. I'm not going to cut the whole thing out, but we're going to cut it out of this area so that you can see what's happening here. So there it is cut out. And when these two intersect, you need to just make sure that they line up. So we need to also reduce this area by that same amount. So before, if you put these right sides together, these were smooth right here. Now that I'm lining up, I can see that, of course, this angle has changed. So I'm lining up on my center fold line, and this is now a different shape down here. So what I want to do is draw my seam allowance in first, which is 3/8. I'm going to do the same down here on the other piece. And this one underneath needs to be shaped to match the one on top. So first thing I know that needs to happen is that this angle needs to match. So this guy underneath needs to match the one that's on top. Okay, so that angle right here that I just drew matches this angle right above it. I also know that this point where they intersect right here is where this curve now needs to match up, since this is now ending right here. So that's the reduction that I'm going to be taking from this other direction. Again, I want to just smooth that out as much as possible, make it a really smooth transition. So that I'm not altering anything but the width of the crotch. I don't want to necessarily change anything else unless you're looking to change other things. So I'm just blending from this curve to that intersection right there. So now if I cut this out, when I go to put these two right sides together, they are going to match up, so that when I sew at that point at the crotch at 3/8, they're going to line up with each other. They're going to match. Now, we've made this change on both the brief front and the brief back. So now these two have both been reduced by 1/2 inch, which means we need to make this exact same change on the crotch piece itself. So all you want to do is take your crotch piece and line it up with these two existing pieces and just mirror these shapes onto that crotch piece so that they match. Simple as that. And now we've brought this in by that little 1/2 inch, which is 1 inch total, which is not nothing. That makes that a lot smaller and probably more comfortable for you if it's just feeling too wide. Once you have made the changes to the brief back and the brief front and your crotch piece itself, the last thing to take into account is the binding pieces. So we've altered the area of the leg openings on both pieces. Not by a lot. We only brought it in 1/2 inch on each side, which potentially didn't change how much binding we require. But it's hard to know exactly because you've changed it. It's been changed. And obviously I made the binding to fit what already exists. So you may want to measure your leg openings depending on how much you reduced your crotch by, to see if that is still going to fit. If you only altered it a little bit, like 3/8 or 1/2 inch, it's probably still going to fit just fine. But if you're altering it a good deal, then the leg binding may no longer fit this length because this has, been measured to fit exactly. So that's the last thing you want to check with this alteration. Is just make sure that that binding is still going to fit, because you haven't, make sure you haven't altered it so much. If it's not going to fit, if you're finding it's just not fitting, you can measure your leg opening and multiply that by 90%. So the binding is 90% the length of the leg opening, and just come up with your new measurement and then cut your binding piece to now fit your new leg opening. All right, I hope that wasn't too painful going through sizing and fit. That's the end of our second installment for the Dune Tank and Briefs Sewalong. Like I said at the beginning, no one likes talking about fit and sizing, but be kind to yourself, be kind about your body. We're all lugging around these curvy 3-dimensional objects, and we're just all doing our best. So don't think too hard about what size you are or any of that. We just want to make it so it fits the way that you want it to fit, so it performs in the way that you want it to perform. So whether that's as pajamas or as loungewear or as actual undergarments, we will figure out a way to make it work for you. And I hope you found all of that really helpful. In the next installment, we're going to get to cutting and testing everything out. How to actually work with your stretch stitches, practicing on a conventional machine and on a serger, practicing with the different kinds of thread. If you watched the first episode, I talked about a stretch thread as well as polyester thread, so we're going to go through that. And all of that's going to be in the third installment, so I will see you there.